So you're a developer evangelist at AppDynamics. What exactly is AppDynamics?
AppDynamics is an application performance monitoring company, and what we do is we help monitor the performance of web and mobile applications. And when performance is suffering, we tell you exactly what went wrong.
Oh, terrific. So you have a lot of PHP experience. How exactly did you get started in working with PHP?
I started really early on, like 2004, 2005. I was doing a lot of consulting, and I stumbled across a framework called Symfony. At the time, I just started contributing minor bug fixes, and then at some point, Yahoo contacted me to rebuild Delicious and Yahoo Answers on Symfony. And then from there, the corporate sponsor behind Symfony is a company called SensioLabs that I joined and started doing a lot of consulting and training. And that's where a lot of basically a lot of my experience comes from, is working on a lot of different projects, auditing performance and scalability, and then just working in the PHP community through the Symfony project.
Okay, so yeah, you have a lot of experience working on these large-scale PHP projects. So
Yeah, absolutely.
what advice would you have for developers who are working on PHP projects with scalability and performance in mind?
Yeah, I think oftentimes they just assume that they should use a different language or that they pick the wrong tool, but there's so many things that you can do before that. So a lot of the advice that I give is more practical. It's not just the PHP. So do blocking work in the background via task and queues, cache as much data as possible, use a reverse proxy cache to stay up to date with your frameworks and the latest versions of the language itself. But more importantly, learn how to use performance tools to actually figure out where you're having problems. So that was the heart of my talk yesterday, is really just walking through sort of the common use cases. And then once you hit a certain scale, there's a sort of drop-in replacements for PHP where you can get even more performance benefits from.
All right, yeah, so speaking of, in terms of drop-in replacements, I know Facebook has HHVM, so there are some companies that with such scale, they're really saving tens of millions of dollars in terms of what they're getting out of these performance gains. But if you're someone who's not quite at that scale, what do you think are some of the best tricks in terms of seeing those types of gains?
Absolutely. I think oftentimes you don't need to replace PHP. You just need to optimize your application.
Okay.
So most of the time that comes down to doing things like caching effectively. So the whole goal of caching is to alleviate load on your application servers. So that's the biggest bang for buck win that I think most people ignore, and that applies for every language. Outside of that, it's really about improving the end user experience or decreasing the end user latency, and you can do that by doing work in the background. And that gives you the benefits twofold. One, better performance through decreased latency. The user's not going to wait as long, but increased scalability because you can just add more workers in the background to process the task faster out of the queues. I think those are the two best techniques that most people overlook. And that if you're just having some performance problems with your PHP project, you can do that pretty much immediately. It's very easy to refactor in an existing project and add some caching or add queuing. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Great. So where do you see PHP going in the future?
That is a very interesting question. I'm not sure. A few years ago, I would have thought it would stay down the same path. With things like Facebook's HHVM, I think it's probably going to move towards that direction, where they completely rewrite the PHP interpreter. It's in a VM with a JIT, and they'll get the performance benefits because of that. I joined Yahoo way back when, and the people who work on HHVM were also my coworkers at Yahoo once upon a time. And what they did there was really write extensions in C to get better performance. That entire team is now, a lot of them are at Facebook, and what you'll see is that there's a big corporate sponsor behind PHP, and who that sponsor is changes over time, but the minds behind the project that continue to improve it are all really the same. So it's still the same thought leadership underneath. It's just the corporate sponsor changes. And it's great to see companies like Facebook invest so heavily in the languages, because that's really what it takes to improve them. Now, for Facebook, there's a definite benefit, because if they improve performance by 20%, they cut down their data center costs by $200 million. For small companies, it really doesn't matter. But I think that's really where the future of PHP is going, is really trending in that direction. So whether it's directly HHVM or they just backport some of the bigger changes, I think that's probably what you'll see. PHP's always been trying to catch up with Java and other sort of more mature languages without all the bloat that comes with that, and I think it's a fine balancing act.
I'd agree. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.